pleasure now to introduce our next speaker, Ross Gibson from CYCJ, who is going to be discussing how we have co-produced our participation strategy within the centre. So Ross, I'll just hand you over to you. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, thanks very much for the introduction, Fiona. So you will know from checking the tweets and from reading your CYCJ news bulletin that you get every month that CYCJ have recently produced, co-produced a participation and engagement strategy. So this content today is just really about trying to highlight some of the points and the content of it. If you want to know more about the actual process of it, I would recommend going to the workshop today if you haven't already signed up for it, but with Beth Ann Logan, Marie Gibson and Wendy Francis Xavier, and they're going to talk about the process of carrying that out and some tips on how you could possibly do such an endeavour yourself. So today is just about the content. So this is a very simplified model, and it clearly isn't a true reflection of the work that CYCJ have done over the last few years. But in the last, since 2018 onwards, we've had participation work through our Youth Justice Voices partnership along with staff. We've had a knowledge exchange, with our research and practice development. And as you heard from Fiona, that has changed slightly recently. But if you just bear that in mind, that this is what we were working with up until more recently. That being the case, CYCJ have been involved in a number of different participation projects in the past. We did the Living It event, we've had Youth Justice Voices, we'd have opportunities for young people to write blogs for CYCJ and so on and so forth. But I think what we felt at CYCJ is that we had a responsibility and a role to build on this and perhaps serve as a bit of a role model within the sector of showing how it could be done and supporting our partners to do the same. So I suppose that takes us to the next part about the participation parables. That I don't know if Claire Burns is on the line, but I used to work with our brother Mike when I was with Glasgow, and he would often say that when you point the finger at somebody, you'd be aware that there's three fingers pointing back at you. And that's not to, I don't mean that in an accusing way that we are pointing the fingers at anybody, but when we, through our work at CYCJ, have attempted to talk about participation, we really need to be walking the walk as well as talking the talk. So our participation and engagement strategy was an attempt to improve what we were doing at the centre in order that we can in turn improve the sector itself. There's also a bit of pedantry involved, that we went from being the Centre for Youth and Criminal Justice to the Children and Young People Centre for Justice, and I want to highlight the possessive apostrophe there, that this ought to be Children and Young People Centre. It's not a centre about children and young people, but rather as a centre that focuses on the life experiences of children and young people who are at risk, who are coming into conflict with the law. So in order for us to really live up to that name, we need to be a centre that is driven and shaped by the very people that we aim to support and assist. So with that in mind, we decided that we needed a strategy to do so. And at CYCJ, we've been really keen to adopt the Laura Lundy model of participation. For those of you who are not familiar with it, it's about creating a space where children feel safe and included, and barriers are taken out of the way so that they can feel as if they're in a safe place where they can express their views. It's to recognise that not only do they have their voice, but that voice ought to be listened to. So to use a quote that I use whenever I talk about participation, that Ellen Maloney wrote in one of her blogs, is that this participation isn't about giving children a voice. Participation is about recognising that children already have that voice. It's about seeking it out. It's about listening to it. It's about acting upon the views that we hear. And to do that, we need to create an audience of people who are willing to listen. And we need to make sure that the levers that we can use as a centre are pressed to give the views of the young children and young people are expressing some influence, so they can help to shape the world around them. So with that in mind, that was the model that we adopted here with CYCJ. It was a work that Pamela Morrison started before her first maternity leave, and Alison Goff adopted that model within the Youth Justice, the Secure Care project and the work she did with STAR. So we got together a group of young people who knew about participation, who had experience of the youth justice system, and they already knew a little bit about CYCJ, so they could already have an idea of what it was we did and how we could do it better. And more detail will be in the workshop, which I would encourage you all to go to, and they will give you a bit more background into it. But really, for it to work, we had to have buy-in from the leadership. So all the way from EGG, our external governance group, our board, all the way through the team, we have bought into this process, and we will now act in accordance to what is our participation and engagement strategy, and using Laura Lundy's model. When we brought this group together, it was on the recognition that we were giving them a blank page, that really we had to cede control over what our strategy would contain over to the children and young people themselves. That's a scary thing to do for an organisation, but I think for us to be a true participatory approach, that's what is required. And it was an iterative process with drafts of the strategy going back and forth, checking things out between one another before we finally settled on the final version, which I'm happy to say was approved by EGG at a subsequent meeting. Is now online, hopefully in the chat, there should be a link to it. And that really sets a blueprint of what we will be doing, not just about in terms of our participation work, but in terms of what we do as a full centre, which is I think is one of the strengths of the strategy. The children and young people who were involved set particular principles that they wanted us to act in accordance with. And I think you'll see the benefit of each of these, of knocking down barriers so that people get involved, valuing the expertise, including where suitable and appropriate for people to be paid for their time, rewarding them for their efforts, remunerating where impossible, and giving them opportunities to build up their CVs. One of the things what you'll see in the following slide is that the participation isn't just about people being paid to take part in a consultation, for example, but it's about learning skills across the centre. So what this now leads to, if you think back to the earlier slides, the children and young people said that they didn't want participation, or participation as engagement, as it now known as, just to sit on its own, and whilst they valued the opportunity to express their views, and for that to be aired within various forums, like as we already do through NIJAG and YJAB and other settings. What they wanted was for participation engagement not only to go up the way and influence change at a policy and national level, but to go across the way. So they wanted it to impact upon the way that we develop our knowledge exchange programmes. They wanted to impact upon our research, and they wanted their views to be featured within our practice and policy development services, so that each different component of CYCJ's work, they had greater influence and a role. So how we were going to do that? Well, as I said, alluded to previously, young people wanted to be rewarded for their time, not merely through money whenever that was appropriate for them doing certain tasks for the centre, but rather when they wanted the opportunity to learn skills. So in the next few months, they're going to be shadowing our office and admin team to learn things about creating events, about using Excel, about updating websites, social media, and so forth. And they're also going to be helping us redesign and redevise our website to make it much more accessible to children, young people and their families. They wanted us to have a greater connection across the country, to seek partners and other local authorities, to deliver roadshows across the full 32 local authorities, so that participation at CYCJ wasn't just something that was done across the central belt, but rather reaching across the whole of Scotland. And they wanted a role within research. So later on this year, the research team and young people with a particular interest will be designing, undertaking, disseminating, and debating research on a topic that fits both with CYCJ's research strategy and their particular interests. And this will be something that will feature more and more in the years to come. They wanted us to make sure that the young people have a voice in the various rooms where decisions are made. That means either representing or bringing their voice with, bringing the actual person into forums where decisions are made about their life, at YJAB and other forums like that. And they made a particular point about external governance group, our board. And what we will be doing as a result of that, and it's been agreed at the Egg, as in the coming weeks and months ahead, we'll be designing a plan of how to recruit 2 people onto the Egg group who have experience of the youth justice system, who bring their own skills, but also can draw on their lived experience to help shape and reinvigorate the work that we do. So whilst we already have people on Egg who have experience of the justice system, we will now be explicitly looking to recruit younger people onto the board and supporting them to fulfil that role. And the young people also wanted us to change the public attitude round about the attitudes towards young people who'd been involved in criminal behaviour in the past. And whilst there's a long way to go towards public attitudes towards those of care experience, they saw that as a template of what could be done. So part of CYCJ's role will be to try and influence and shape societal change in attitudes. So how we're going to do that in reality is through our various participation projects. So we've recently recruited Lizzie Coots and Wendy Francis Xavier, who are going to support us in our participation work. Wendy's going to support STAR, a group of young people and adults who have experience of the secure care system. Lizzie is particularly going to look at the 12 to 16-year-old group and see how we can have better relationships and tie in with groups of that age to help them have a voice in the decisions making that goes on around them. Whilst Ruth remains in place in the Youth Justice Voices project. And I would invite any and all of you to get in touch with myself or Lizzie, Wendy or Ruth to talk about what role you could possibly play in introducing young people into these projects. So I'm going to finalise with just a few questions, or rather asks of yourself. What we'd like you to do is to spread the word about the strategy, about these different projects within the organisations that you work with and have contact with. We are actively looking to get in touch with young people and groups to think through how we can support them to have a say in the decisions that are made about their lives. We'd like you to share your experiences of how you're getting on with participation. Come along to the practitioners forum that Ruth runs, or perhaps get in touch about a roadshow that we could deliver to your staff. And also encourage you to think broader about participation, as we heard from the young people, they don't want just to have a say in the decisions, they want to have a say in your organisations. So in the 200 odd people that are on this call just now, I'm sure there'll be a good proportion of you that can find spaces within your organisations for people to influence the decisions that are made on a strategic level, but also to develop skills, meet new people, and to develop their CVs. So please come along to the workshop if you can later on, and please get in touch with the 4 of us to discuss how we can support your organisation and young people to take part in the decision-making processes.
Thank you, Ross.